Hello and welcome to CoSN's webinar, The Right Mix, Designing a Digital Content and Curriculum Strategy. CoSN is a leading national professional organization for chief technology officers. It serves K-12 leaders who, through strategic use of technology, improve teaching and learning. The core value is that the primary challenge we face in using technology effectively is human, not technical. And that's a thread that you'll see throughout our conversation here today. And our audience is school system, technology, and education leaders. So welcome, everyone. Before we start, I would like to thank our sponsors of the webinar series, without whom we would not be able to present this information to you. We've got a great number of vendor partners, and we thank them. We're very grateful for their support. My name is Bjerede. I am CoSN's principal for mobile learning and infrastructure. We have a great panel here today. We have Lenny Schad, who is the Chief Technology Information Officer for Houston ISD, Grenita Lathan, who is the Chief Academic Officer for Houston ISD, and Andy Marcinek, Chief Information Officer for the Worchester Academy. Would each of you like to take just 2 minutes to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background? Grenita?
Hi, Grenita Lathan, Chief Academic Officer for HISD. Most recently, I served as the Chief Schools Office for our Transformation Office for elementary schools, and also I served our North Area region for our most highly impacted schools in HISD.
Lenny?
Good afternoon, I'm Lenny Schad. I've been with HISD since January of 2013, and within my first 3 weeks there, the superintendent at that time, Terry Greer, talked to us about wanting to begin a digital transformation initiative in Houston. And so for the past 3.5, 4 years, that's what this district has been doing. And we've worked hard from a technology perspective, from a curriculum perspective, from a leadership perspective to move this journey along. And digital curriculum is just another stepping stone in this journey.
Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Marcinek. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Worcester Academy in Worcester, Massachusetts. For those of you who aren't from Worcester, it's pronounced Worcester, so there's a little phonetic spelling there. For the past year, I came to Worcester Academy on July 1st of this past year. Prior to that, I was the Chief Open Education Advisor for the United States Department of Education. It was the first time that role had been incorporated in the department, and so I've worked primarily on launching and rolling out the Go Open initiative, along with several other events and convenings to help expand and accelerate the use of openly licensed educational resources in K-12 schools across the country. So similar to the work that's been done in higher ed with Z-Degree and several other programs, OpenStax and Merlot, I've been trying to bring more awareness and advocacy to open educational resources in the K-12 space. So that's what I've been doing for the past year. And I also have worked as an English teacher and instructional tech specialist here in both Massachusetts and Pennsylvania.
Wonderful, and thank you all for coming and sharing your expertise with us. The way this panel is going to work today is that I will have a number of questions for these experts, and the first one I'm directing towards Andy, and that is, how does shifting to digital resources change teaching and learning?
Yeah, it changes it dramatically, and not just the, well, when you think about this, I think a lot of people think of this as a medium or a technology shift. And in a lot of our work, especially, I think with what Lenny and I do in information technology, that's a big part of it. But I think the entire shift in pedagogy is something we're looking at here in ways in which we think about where they're incorporating project-based learning, competency-based learning models, personalized learning models, blended learning models. All of these models that have been out there, a lot of our Go Open districts have started working in training and preparing teachers in these models, and then shifting and slowly starting to move, once they have those philosophies down, to move towards the digital resources. This is also a re-examination of what a teacher is in the classroom, not just a sage on the stage type of lecturer in that role, but more of a facilitator of learning and learning with the students in this capacity. And open educational resources really allow for that to happen, and also allow students to explore more resources that are relevant and at their levels.
Great. Lenny or Grenita, would you like to answer the question as well?
So I guess I would say the shift to digital resources by itself, I think, is not a strategy. I think this is, again, as I mentioned in my introduction, this is a part of the journey. And so without the proper support, both from a technology perspective, but from a curriculum perspective, from a leadership perspective, and even from the student side of the house, how do they get used to using and learning with digital textbooks when they used to have the paper-based textbooks? So for me, this is all part of a bigger strategy to say, how are you changing the culture of instruction inside of a school district? And each of these support departments, whether it's curriculum, whether it's leadership development, whether it's technology, understanding what their role is in making that happen. So from technology's perspective, we've got to have anytime, anywhere. We've got to have our network that's reliable, that's scalable. From the curriculum side, they've got to ensure that the digital resources are aligned and that they fit into our instructional strategy. But most importantly, from the principal's perspective, what are they doing to help the teachers understand what this new way of instruction looks like? And then, believe it or not, our students, they struggle with this as well. So what are we doing with our students to help them understand how to use these digital resources? Because now it's not just a textbook that you carry home, but it's a plethora of digital resources that they can really customize to their own learning style versus just this textbook with paper and pencil. So how do they start to get accustomed to now leveraging your learning style and going out and finding those resources that really fit that style?
Okay, thank you, Lenny. My next question is, how do you break the silos between instruction and technology? Grenita, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. Starting to work together as a team. As team members, we hold each other accountable. We meet regularly and align specific tasks for each member of the team. We've reorganized our staff as needed to make sure that we don't have the silos, but it truly is a partnership between the curriculum and the technology department where we all have the same amount of ownership around this partnership.
Great, thank you. Lenny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I would say that the first thing that has to happen is there has to be this level of understanding of what can be done today and then developing the roadmap for the future. And the academic chiefs that I've worked with, and Grenita is fairly new in this role, and I had the privilege of working with her when she was a school officer, so I got to work with her on the principal leadership side of the house. But for the curriculum side, it really is sitting down and understanding what they want to accomplish and then figuring out how we make that happen. And that sometimes is a journey. So it's making sure that expectations are aligned. And then Grenita talked about it. There's a lot of conversations that have to go on. And you're moving a lot of people's cheese, in areas that used to be controlled by technology and technology alone. Now we have curriculum people sitting in those discussions. And I remember early on when we first started having those meetings, there was a lot of times, my team would be like, hey, what are they doing in here? And why are they asking questions? Likewise, I have some of my team members sitting in with Grenita's secondary ed staff meetings, and I remember when we initially started those, it was that same sense. And so it's taking those touchy toes, and it's again coalescing around one vision and saying it doesn't matter what we've done in the past. Here is our vision, and here's what each of our departments' roles are in accomplishing that. And guess what? We will not be successful unless we work together. And so that takes a lot of time. And Grenita and I have conversations, and we're going to continue to have conversations. Where we start to see our teams, you know, bumping their heads, then that's something where we are going to have to get involved. So this isn't a process of, you know, one and done, where Grenita and I meet with the team and say, okay, here's what we want, go make it happen. There's regular check-ins, and there's been a cross-functional team that's been created in HISD back in 2013, and that cross-functional team still exists today. And now we meet every other week, but they're still meeting, talking about what's working and what's not working. And Grenita and I are in those meetings, and we're listening to what goes on. And then it's also, you know, just including other areas that are the recipients of what we think is our great work, and is it really great work, and what do we need to tweak? So, you know, it's an overused term, but communication really is the key to this. But it's taking that communication and breaking silos. It's repurposing people. It's changing roles, and it's continually evaluating this to see where you tweak. What we did 3 years ago is not what we're doing now. And I would venture to say if we were to have this webcast a year from now, we would have made significant changes because our organization is growing and maturing in this transformation.
So, Lenny, that was great. Can I ask you a follow-up question? I was wondering, do you have an example of a decision that was made that turned out better because you had all the right people at the table, which might have gone the other way without that kind of collaboration?
Sure, I'll give you a great example. So as we start to move in the adoption of digital curriculum, you think about that very traditional role of textbook adoption and who are the typical players in textbook adoption. We went through our first cycle and we let that group still remain and go through the textbook adoption process. And what we found out is, in some cases, the books that they were adopting weren't capable of fitting into our digital ecosystem. And so we had to really scale back what we could provide digitally and go to a more traditional, you know, textbook process. So what we learned out of that is the technology side of the house now has to have some input into the textbooks that we're adopting from a digital curriculum conformance perspective. And so we learned the hard way year one by not having those individuals at the table, what the result was and how much work that caused us. Now you fast forward to the next textbook adoption. Now we have a whole new process that's been adopted with different roles and responsibilities. And so we're going to ensure that the textbooks and the content that we're adopting in the district fits into our ecosystem in some form or fashion. And that's a great example of moving people's cheese and repurposing roles. And now all of a sudden you have, you know, the quote propeller heads at a textbook adoption meeting. What the hell are they doing there, you know? And it's until you sit down and really have those conversations that people understand.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lenny. Andy?
Yeah, I just want to add a couple things I heard there. And I think it's kind of a combination of both what Grenita and Lenny was saying, in the sense that these technology and instruction should never be disparate. They should never be seen as different entities. They should be, nor should digital curriculum be seen as an initiative, or technology be seen as an initiative. It should be seen as just the fabric or the oxygen of the school. And I think a lot of these times these initiatives are rolled out like it's another thing, or it's another thing. But that's not really what should be happening, especially when you think about technology and you think about what its purpose is in the classroom. The focus should always be on learning. There's never a way in which you make technology the center of anything. Technology is simply on the periphery of what already really great teachers are doing at this point. And so when you think about what does that look like, and what's an example of that, where you look at active learning, and technology should always be done actively. It should not just be done passively, where a student's looking at a screen or just absorbing from a screen, or typing on a paper, doing research in a legacy model like a laptop. There should be active participation in creating and exploring through the technology when the technology is right to be used. And I think when you frame it like that, I think it really kind of breaks that silo in the sense that we're no longer looking at two separate things. We're looking at learning, period. The instructional design, the technology, all kind of circles around that, and essentially that's what school's all about, and that's how school's moving and shifting away from this model of just, you know, we're using the tool of the teacher right in front of us. Now that's changed in the Google generation and beyond, and so it's continually shifting, but at the same time we're also keeping learning in the center of every technology plan and every you know, initiative that should happen in a school.
That's a great point. The thing that I would add is when we started Power Up, which is our digital transformation in HISD, we worked really hard to make sure technology wasn't the focus of this initiative. And so when we branded our program, the brand was all about changing instruction and preparing our students. There wasn't anything about the device or about digital content. And I think that that's really important. There are many support layers underneath this, but at the end of the day, what will make transformation occur is when you stop doing things and when you fundamentally change what you have been doing. And if those two things are occurring in your district, you stand a really good chance of truly transforming what you've been doing.
Fantastic. Next question. Who should be involved in selecting digital resources? Andy?
Yeah, I'll start with this one, and you know, I see this as almost every stakeholder in a school should be involved in this decision, and in this strategic planning for the curation, the organization, the implementation, all of those pieces. When I was at the department, we developed the Go Open District Launch Packet. And so what this packet was designed to do is essentially we had an outline of things where we thought, okay, this is where the steps should lie in kind of shifting and who should be involved. But then we filled in that outline with the practitioner voice and a lot of our Go Open districts. So this is a great way to, if you're a district out there and you're looking to get started, you can figure out who could be on your team, who's going to be involved, who's going to be making decisions. And so that's free at tech.ed.gov. You can check that out and use that today. But the great thing about that resource is that it's the voice of the districts out there that have begun to scale up open educational resources and have started to move away from textbooks in a traditional sense. You know, the other thing is that it's chock full of resources as well. There's resources. There's a rubric that a school district in Liberty, Missouri, they were using a rubric to evaluate their course content that they were bringing in. So they had this rubric that they designed in-house. So that was really a great way to see how to do this, and this resource has all those resources in there for anyone to access. I'll also add to that real quick. I think one of the things that, in talking with a lot of districts who are Go Open districts, the most important person to add into these conversations in making the shift is not only student voice but also parental voice. You know, in the sense that all of us on this webinar right now did not learn with digital resources. We learned through very traditional methods with textbooks, as do most parents today. So it's really showing them that, okay, we're giving your sons and daughters and your students the best resources that we can provide. Having some cost savings as well as being a benefit of these resources, but really getting parents to understand these resources and actually get them to use them. There's a school in Williamsfield, Illinois, and what they do is they actually brought parents in to show them the resources. They have them available online so that parents can actually see the instructional materials that the students are getting, and they learn about them along with the students. So it can be an opportunity for learning and really bringing together a school community as well.
Thank you. Grenita, what's your experience?
Can I just add also community members, as we think about our employers in the community also being a part of that conversation as we look at acquiring digital resources?
Anything to add, Lenny?
Yeah, so I would kind of break this into two different areas, because I think it's really important to understand current capabilities of your digital ecosystem before you start to go out and do this. So I would say early on, who should be involved in this are your publishers, your current LMS provider, whatever learning management system you're planning to house these resources in, and then your digital curriculum team from the school district, to really understand, okay, what are we capable of doing out of the gate, and what do we need to phase in. So for me, that's the very first question that has to occur. Once you really understand your as-is state, then I think it's a conversation of, we want to procure content, we want to create content, and we want to curate content. And those three areas, you're involving student voice, you're involving staff voice, you're involving community voice, you're giving people the opportunity to rate content. So if you have resources out there that teachers are using and they find it to be a great resource, then rate it. And now if I'm a teacher coming in looking for something, I'm going to go after the 5 stars, you know. And so initially it's that as-is state and understanding what your current capabilities are. And then as you start to implement these things, really focusing on those 3 areas: procure, curate, and create. And you know, the creation is relatively new. It's a new concept right now. But I'll tell you, in HISD, we have a lot of really interesting things being created. And so that's one that picks up very quickly. I think that you also need to have an organization like IMS Global involved, because they're the people that really talk about interoperability and how can you take content from these provider ecosystems and now bring it into your ecosystem and make that transparent. You know, at the end of the day, this is all about making it easy for a teacher. If a teacher has to go to 15 places to look at various types of content, it would be just as easy to go to Google or Pinterest or, you know, any of these resources out there. So making it very streamlined so they have a lot of resources at their disposal in your learning object repository, that's the end game. And so an organization like IMS Global, they really understand how that interoperability layer works. So there's many fingers in this pot, and that's why I say this is a journey and this is an evolution. I think the tendency with a lot of people out there might be to sit and listen to this to think, holy cow, this thing is mammoth, and I don't even know where to begin. The good news is you can begin with baby steps, right? And it's listening to webinars like this. It's reaching out to organizations that are doing this that can help lay out your roadmap, but you don't have to bite this apple off all at once. HISD, we've been doing this for 4 years now. So we're way along this journey, but starting out, there's different phases that you can implement very quickly and be very successful with, but you've got to have a strategy, and it's got to be an enterprise perspective.
Next question. Grenita, what should districts keep in mind as they choose digital resources?
Too much, number one, that too much can be overwhelming for our teachers and our principals, because at the end of the day, they are the main users of the content that we're providing. Streamlining content into a one-stop shop, that is one of the outstanding benefits of what we've done here in the district as it relates to what we call our hub, where everything is available for our teachers and our principals there, but just making sure that we're not overwhelming our principals and our teachers.
Lenny?
Yeah, so I would, and Grenita's being gracious, because I think one of the things that we're struggling with now is we have over, I think, 1.5 million objects in our repository. And while that's a great number, when you go do a search, you get, you know, 60,000 responses back. That's overwhelming to a teacher. And so we're working really hard to make it, giving the capability to streamline the searches down so it's a more manageable number. And so, you know, Grenita is exactly right. It's always keeping that end user in mind on what we're providing and how they're going to use it. And then I think it's looking at how is their content going to be displayed in your object repository, because different providers will give you their content in different ways. And sometimes, you know, early on, it's not even usable. So it's really coming up with what your expectations are for the content and how it's going to fit inside your system and be used in your system. And then, you know, it's making sure that there's that alignment. And that's why the relationship between curriculum and technology has to be so clear. The technology role in this is making sure the interoperability layers work, and the LTI packages or the common cartridges are functionally doing what they need to do. The curriculum team is going in and vetting, okay, here's what it actually is, and are we seeing the right searches come up with the right content? And all of us have to work together and then go back to that content provider to say, okay, here's what we need you to change. So it's an iterative process. It's one that we're getting much better at. We're much quicker. I think the providers out there are really starting to understand what their role and their place is in it. But it's an evolution, it's iterative, and it's making sure, again, everybody understands what their role is in the process and not getting ticked off when something doesn't work, because this is a lot of ground that we're breaking for the first time. And I will tell you, that's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of in HISD is the teams have never been into this finger-pointing scenario where if something doesn't work, we're blaming each other. We're at the table, we're understanding why it's not working, we're bringing our provider in, we're bringing our vendor in, and we're having conversations and we're moving the needle forward.
Thanks. Andy?
Yeah, and I like the point that Lenny made, and he's made this in several things he said about the journey, and this is definitely a journey. This isn't something. This isn't like taking a Chromebook out of a box and turning it on, and you know it happens. It can happen with the right infrastructure, but there are a lot of things to keep in mind along this journey, and it's gonna. One thing is that it's gonna take time. You know, like Lenny said, we're still kind of in the infancy of this shift, and it's a monumental shift in the timeline of education. You know, we've had a lot of different disruptors in education over time. Most of them have come in, you know, physical devices or technology or pencils or whatever. But I think what we're doing now is we're not only changing a medium by which we deliver content, but we're changing the whole pedagogy. We're blowing up the whole pedagogical framework and flipping it on its head. And so I think in that regard, I think this is a mindset shift and this is a cultural shift, you know, as Lenny said before too. And I think what districts need to keep in mind is that, you know, this is not an all-in scenario. You know, in order to really achieve scalability, you really have to plan this out. Like in the previous question, you have to have the right people in place, having the right conversations, and you really have to have the ability to approach faculty with this as if it's not going to be something else. And so some examples of what I've seen really work well in districts is, again, I'm going to use Liberty Public Schools in Liberty, Missouri, and what they've incorporated is a teacher on special assignment model in order to help bring these resources to the faculty. So they're pulling regular teachers out of their classrooms for either a semester or a full year, paying them a stipend on top of their normal salary, and having these teachers really be the ones that already know or are involved in OER curation and discovery. And then what they're doing within their teams is that they're actually then going out as they're curating and resourcing or organizing these resources, they're then going out and preparing and supporting their teams in their respective school buildings. And so the TOSA, or Teacher on Special Assignment model, it seems to be working really well for them as far as looking internally for their best professional resources to launch professional development and also encourage teacher leadership. The other pieces of this that are important to really recognize is that, you know, I think a lot of people feel like when you shift away from a textbook, open educational resources, that you have to run out to the shopping mall and you have to buy it, or you have to pull it off the shelves if it's free or if it's licensed. And there are two different entry points we've seen a lot of in districts across the country. One is, you know, you can find what's already out there, and with a Creative Commons license, that's usually attached to these resources, you may be able to do different things, remix, adapt, modify this resource. For example, if you took Engage New York's math curriculum and you wanted to modify that and shift it and shape it to yours, or something from the Utah Educator Network that has resources for science, math, and English, you could take those and modify them to what you need in your district and align them. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to begin sketching it out and creating internally. Finding some of those champion teachers that have done this or are doing it, who know about it, who know what OER doesn't have to scratch their head when they say OER. And so having them kind of build those resources internally. And then the next thing is that these can serve as, this isn't an activity of wiping textbooks off the face of the earth. This is looking at our instructional materials and seeing what is the highest quality, what is the most relevant to our students. Making sure there are students out there learning science, that their science textbooks don't say that Pluto is still a planet, or that the current president is George W. Bush. And so there are kids out there that's their experience every day. And so equity and inclusion is a big part of this. And so you can treat open educational resources kind of as a supplementary resource initially to get faculty and teachers understanding of how these resources can work alongside their textbooks, and then maybe stagger that in a year or two when that textbook comes up for it's the refresh of the license. You might be able to get away from that. But I think ultimately it's about time. It's about finding the right pace for faculty and making sure that we're reinvesting money saved on textbooks into the teaching profession, that we're paying teachers to do this work, we're encouraging them to grow and learn in this regard, and making sure it doesn't seem like it's just another thing on their plate or it's another initiative that the district's going to change in 2 or 3 years. This is going to be the standard going forward as things move and shift, and the market is shifting in this direction. So you're going to start to see this be more and more prevalent, and hopefully with Creative Commons licensing, the idea of having a shared culture of learning and having a lot of opportunities for teachers to share across district, state, and city lines, that's where I think we really see the power of this taking off.
Andy, I completely agree with you. In fact, we're starting to see some of these learning object repositories amongst vendors that you're able to share with other school districts, the repository, and pull information in. I know in HISD we partnered with a number of school districts around the country to help us ingest our first subsets of content. So, one of the things that I say a lot is in education we love to reinvent the same wheel. And this is an area where we don't have time for every district to reinvent the wheel. The content is the content, and especially if we're creating and curating this content, if we now have rating systems that can be shared amongst other school districts, we're just jump-starting everything out there. And so I think that that's a really important facet that people really need to start to embrace and quit trying to do it all themselves.
Next question. Lenny, you mentioned interoperability earlier. I know that a lot of districts are currently concerned with implementing single sign-on and content interoperability, but are there other kinds of interoperability that we should be taking into account when choosing digital resources at this time?
I think, again, interoperability is this behemoth thing that sits out there, and everybody thinks it's just an impossible task to take on, and it's not. There's phases of interoperability. And single sign-on is probably one of the easiest things to implement. And there are a lot of companies out there that don't even have that kind of capability yet. And so for us in HISD, it's understanding our digital ecosystem and establishing what we are considering our interoperability non-negotiables. And if you're a vendor that's going to come in and expect to work with us, if at a minimum single sign-on isn't on your radar, it's not that we won't do business with you, but if you aren't single sign-on in 6 to 8 months, then we won't do business with you. But we're going to give you that shot to come in, and we have ways to work around that. So interoperability is an evolution. You know, I think the ultimate goal is the thin common cartridge, or you know, those kind of things that basically ingest this content into your ecosystem. I'm not having to bounce out to all the other publishers and content providers. So interoperability is definitely something that's manageable. It's completely dictated by what your digital ecosystem capabilities are, and you can take it from single sign-on to LTI to common cartridge to that extreme. But understand, once you're in that journey and your users start to really embrace this content at their fingertips and this live content, this very active content, it's something that never goes away, and it's kind of like bandwidth or, you know, email space. Give a user a new email space, and the next day they're out. Or increase bandwidth, and the next week you're bumping that boundary again. Interoperability is one of these areas that will never go away, that needs to continually be understood, babysat, and it really is a three-legged partnership. It's a three-legged milk stool. You've got to have the content provider, your vendor, and the district all working hand in hand to make sure that the expectations are met. But again, you can start out very simple with single sign-on, and that's your foray into interoperability.
Anyone else have anything to add? Great. Let me move on to the next question, which is about privacy. What are the privacy concerns with digital resources, and how should they be addressed? Grenita, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. In HISD, we really are focused on a culture of safety and security as we think about our digital resources, providing digital citizenship training for staff, teachers, students. It's a major concern. All of our team meetings is engaged around concerns as it relates to privacy. Are we ensuring that the resources that we're putting in front of our teachers and our students, are we ensuring their privacy? And it's a major concern. It's going to be an ongoing concern as more and more school districts look at this, as we embrace additional resources. But it's the topic of every conversation around digital resources and access for students.
Andy?
Yeah, kind of what Grenita said was all spot on, and you know, I think that kind of sums it all up. And I think it's about, you know, first educating the students, educating the staff, and how to use, you know, make good choices around digital tools, digital resources, and then I'm sure from my perspective, from being a CIO, and I'm sure Lenny would agree with this as well, is the one thing that always keeps me up at night is making sure that student information stays safe and secure at all times. And I think that's really, anytime you say something is digital, you run the risk of that. Right now, I think, you know, it's really looking at the vendors and the platforms you're working with, making sure they have all their you know, boxes checked when it comes to privacy, and it comes to student data security, and making sure that's also all in that package. So I think in you know, vetting and looking at your tool providers that you're going to be using, you want to make sure that question is one of the first questions you check off when making these decisions. The other thing that's not really related to privacy, but also kind of comes up a lot in these conversations, is the idea of intellectual property and understanding who owns the resources that are created. And so there's no one, you know, sweeping answer for that, and it really falls in your teacher contracts and how those are the language in those reads. It's a question that always comes up. Teachers spend a lot of time creating these resources, you know, and then it's, you know, is it the property of the district, or is it the property of that teacher? Was it done on you know, taxpayer time, or was it done outside? So it's a continual you know, question in all of this, but I think kind of having that conversation with faculty and everyone involved, with your union representatives and whoever else is involved, you want to make sure that's a conversation you have early and often if it is something that's evolving.
All right. Penultimate question. Andy, what are the advantages and disadvantages of OER?
I think the advantages, there's a lot of advantages. I think the biggest advantage is local control. I think the idea of having your creative content professionals, educators, having an annual review of resources that they're using, being able to modify works that typically would be limited by copyright or by the license of that work. So I think the ability for a district to have local control, to really let the professionals, the educators, review and analyze and making sure that those resources are the most relevant, and really getting that. We talk about student voice a lot and student agency, and sometimes we miss teacher voice because that should be a big thing, and it should be a buzzword. And if it isn't, I'm going to start it right now. But I think teacher voice is something that should be involved in the content. And for years, we've been handing our teachers scripts in the forms of prepackaged curriculum. And so I think this is an opportunity for not only districts to think about this. There are districts, North Kansas City Public Schools. They decided to they were going to spend $600,000 on 6th and 7th grade next gen science standards curricula, and instead they budgeted over the course of several years $60,000. They used part of that money to actually pay teachers to curate, to train them, to invest in their time, and to be able to build these resources. And so at this juncture, they have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. All science is all built in through CK12. Flexbooks, they're moving towards math in the coming years, and they haven't even spent a third of that $600,000 that they were going to spend. So I've always said the best return on investment a district can make is to invest in teachers, because they're the ones that are going to do the work. They're the ones that are going to really understand the content well, and allowing them to jump in with this and really understand and collaborate with others and work with the curriculum together, I think is going to help. It's going to help everyone involved. Disadvantages: this all takes time. This is as Lenny said, I think a great thing. It's a journey, but it's a journey with really good outcomes along the way, really awesome milestones that are really going to impact your students and their ability to learn and to work and thrive in the future of the global economy that's continually shifting and moving. So we need to prepare them for things that we don't know what it's going to be yet. So in that regard, we need to make sure we're giving them the best opportunities through different pedagogical models, but also giving them the most high quality, relevant materials as well.
So I would say I completely agree, Andy. You hit everything spot on. I would say that the biggest advantages are the biggest disadvantages are almost one and the same for OER. And let me explain. I think this links directly to our previous question, right? This is the wild, wild west. And a teacher with the internet connection has more power than they've ever had before. And when you start to embrace this philosophy of, we want you to go out and find content that you think is relevant beyond us handing your teacher edition textbook, right? Go find that. You're giving those teachers a lot of power, and I think that that's a great thing. But power combined with ignorance is a very dangerous thing. And teachers don't understand yet all of the ramifications of this OER software and what's held in these little, 5-page license agreements in 0.2 font that nobody really reads, or going to that Web 2.0 tool and clicking yes, 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 now I have access to that stuff. And so while having the freedom to go out and pick these kind of things is a great advantage, it also becomes a huge disadvantage because teachers can step into uncharted territory and unwillingly and unknowingly cause a lot of damage. So, I think that there has to be a very concerted focus on awareness around this whole environment. and it has to be something that districts jump on right away with teachers and with students. In HISD, we've actually created these little 2-minute, even 30-second videos. I used to work in the oil industry, and every time we had to go on to a refinery, before we could go out into the unit, we had to watch a safety video. And it was a 2-minute safety video, but it just kind of brought the things to awareness. We've taken that same concept, and now we've created little privacy and little licensing safety videos. So a principal, when they bring their staff together, they can show these. And like I said, it's not time-consuming, 2 minutes, and just to make teachers start to think through this. Part of next year is we're going to have mandatory training around student data privacy, around licensing, around intellectual property, around copyright, just so that we're preparing our teachers to be more educated in this wild, wild west arena. And so that's part of the equation, is just awareness, because there's only so much we can do from a technology perspective. The other thing is, once there's this ability to go get the content, one teacher's perspective on great content might be a district's perspective on, oh no, that is not what we want. And so there has to be some vetting around this, and that's why I keep going back to these rating systems, from my perspective, are so important. Because Grenita she will never have a big enough staff to vet the district purchased curriculum plus all the free curriculum teachers have their access to. But if we leverage our 15,000 teachers in the district to rate the content as it's coming in, now we become very powerful very quick. So again, it's creating this culture of accountability amongst all of us, openness to say, yeah, I really think this isn't good content, and building that whole infrastructure around it. And that is a change of mindset. You know, the one thing that I will add is technology people and curriculum people, they, in most cases, are perfectionists, right? They want their curriculum to be perfect that they put out. And technology wants their processes to be perfect. I said it earlier, this is uncharted water. We're breaking new ground. And we have to make sure our organizations are comfortable saying, you know what we thought was a great idea a month ago, it sucked, and it doesn't work. And we come back together and we say, okay, here's what we're going to do next to fix this. We've got to be comfortable admitting our mistakes. And I can tell you from these two groups, that's very difficult for them to do. They want it to be perfect out of the gate. And so it's creating that culture where we're comfortable coming in saying, didn't go like we thought. We're going to come up with plan B, and we're going to roll it out, and we're going to do it. And then there's got to be this whole awareness around it.
I just want to echo one thing that Lenny said about, you know, there is a lot of teacher preparation in this. And if there's anyone out there that works in an undergrad or graduate teacher preparation program, make sure that you are infusing these types of conversations in your program, so that when teachers are coming out of these higher ed programs and coming into the classroom, that they understand that it's not like the classroom they went to school in. And even if it's the, you know, you always hear the stereotype of, well, they're a young teacher, they'll just get technology, right? Because they're under 30. Yeah, no, that's not how it goes. And so I think we need to, both in our graduate school and our undergraduate teacher preparation programs, we have to make sure that these pillars are standard and staple throughout all of these programs, because it will be nice, you know. And as to Lenny's point, I think it's, you know, we're still kind of new in this, so those programs are going to take some time, and the teachers we get 5 or 6 years from now may have those skill sets, so we don't have to spend the time during PD days preparing and training those things. That they'll just be kind of part of the arsenal that these new teachers have. So I think that's a big point to make sure we get that across, that teacher prep programs are an essential partner in all of this as well.
Thank you. We're now to our last prepared question. How do you combine digital resources from different sources, especially combining OER and proprietary resources? Who wants to kick that off?
We talk about our learning.
Go ahead, Grenita.
Our learning management system, its learning allows us to rate individual pieces of content so that future searches yield the best resources no matter the source. So we put a system in place where we can search, we can rate, so that when teachers are utilizing those resources, they know exactly what they're looking for and they're able to sort through, like Lenny said, all of the millions of objects that we have in there, but making it fast and readiness available for them.
Yeah, I guess for me on this one, you know, the proprietary resources, the OER resources, from an end user perspective, they could care less. They just want a good resource that they pull up that they can see, is it aligned to my TEAC or my, you know, Common Core, and how do I plug it into a lesson. The integration of proprietary resources versus OER resources can vary dramatically, and the challenges with each are significant. And that's why I can't stress enough having a partner like IMS Global, that their focus is interoperability. That's a non-negotiable. You've got to have that layer, that transport layer, so that it doesn't really depend if it's OER or if it's proprietary. You know, I think, again, the focus of this has to be what are your resources that you're bringing into your system, and more importantly, how is it going to be leveraged and viewed inside your ecosystem? How are teachers going to get access to it? You know, the proprietary systems, they're used to everybody coming to their ecosystem, and they don't want to share that limelight. And so I remember initially when we first started working with publishers, you know, they wanted to be the first one that came up in the search. And, you know, they would write their packages and their common cartridges to ensure that. And, you know, when we started to break that barrier, say you're one of many, that's a philosophical change for them. And so, you know, it's understanding how do you get information out of these publisher ecosystems, and even some OER providers, they have their own ecosystem that they would like you to be able to use. And so it's really getting down to that deep interoperability layer to say, how are we bringing it in? How is it going to live inside of our ecosystem? How are we keeping it updated? You know, the ultimate goal, really, I think, for everybody is to get away from this concept, if I'm a proprietary resource, of buying your entire textbook. I might want only chapter 3 from your textbook. How can we move to that point where I'm just buying chapter 3 from you? And so I think, again, as what's been mentioned earlier, it's just part of our evolution. From an end user, they don't care whether it's OER or proprietary. From the tech perspective, the curriculum perspective, that transport layer, that interoperability functionality is going to be key.
Yeah, and I'll add just one quick piece to both of these comments. What was just said was both Grenita and Lenny was spot on. And I see this question, and something came up. I had a chance to speak at a Harvard Graduate School of Education class about digital curriculum transitions a few weeks ago. And in the class, the discussion came up around what's more important in the transition to digital content, and is it the content or is it the design? And it really kind of got me thinking, and then I got to the pleasure of, after I spoke, I got to watch the students actually debate this topic, and it really was fascinating. And I think to the point where I think from the classroom lens, I think teachers want high quality, they want efficient resources, and resources that they can have some autonomy to really modify and change and adapt to personalize for how their students are gonna be learning. And so I think that's kind of the key point in all of this, is just to, you know, are we creating new efficiencies for our educators that are impacting learning in a really great way? And I think you have to kind of think about that question. And then, you know, wherever you get the content from, you know, does the design then, the ability to design instruction really impactfully, how does that mesh together? And so I think those are some of the guiding questions. And again, every school is different. Every school is different variables and different hurdles. So I think this question is going to range in answers and responses based on institutions and what their makeup is.
So where did the Harvard grads land? Which one was it, the chicken or the egg? Design or content?
So design definitely won out, but it was very close. It was a very close debate, and I wish I could have videotaped it and shared it because it was just both sides were really making great points about, well, without okay, yeah, you're right, kind of like with the chicken or the egg type dilemma. So that's essentially where it led. But their points and counterpoints were fascinating, and I was probably the best debate I've seen all year. So I'll say that it was a good debate.
So Grenita, which one? Which one do you think?
Chicken and egg. That's a good question, Lenny. I'm 50-50.
That's a good answer. That's why I love working with you, Grenita.
It depends on what day of the week it is, Lenny.
Wonderful. Joel, before we head on into the audience questions, I would like to share a resource called the Guide to Choosing Digital Content and Curriculum. This was developed by the Center for Digital Education with ISTE and CoSN. It's got 3 sections. One is about the planning, and as the folks in the panel, I'm sure, will attest, you always have to start with the why. You have to start with your thinking about why you're doing a digital transition and to plan everything that you do around that result, that goal. There's a second section that's more about talking about what kind of digital content and curriculum options are available. It goes into a fair amount of detail about what you can do with open education resources and how you can get them, what you need to think about. And finally, it's got a section on implementation, which is pretty pragmatic. It's talking about the things you need to know and have in your environment in order to successfully implement shift to digital content. And now I would like to see if we have any audience questions. I see one. Let's see here. What learning management system has been most effective for organizing the objects? What do you guys have to say about that?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for the vendor that we have in-house, because that's really the only one that I've been familiar from a digital content perspective. We use a product called It's Learning. And we've seen a lot of really good success. I think they've grown as a product as we've evolved down this road, but we use It's Learning.
Do we have any more audience questions? Okay.
What was the last question there? What was the last question?
About learning management systems. Which was most effective?
Okay. I'll just quickly say 2 points on that. One that I've seen work very well with a lot of districts kind of starting out on this, and it's not really an LMS, but it can serve several functions of it, and it's simply Google Apps for Education. I've seen some districts work really well with that, the ability to share and collaborate within the Google ecosystem, having kind of a single sign-on. Now with Google Classroom, it works really nicely. So I've seen that kind of as a good kind of segue, not quite to the level of something like It's Learning or Canvas or Schoology, is some of the more bigger LMS systems. I think Canvas Instructure is also another good one that I've seen work really well because of they actually have an OER repository built in through Canvas Commons. So that's another one that works really well. Plus they have a lot of APIs that you can bring in content from Google, from CK12 Flexbooks has an API with them. So kind of like what Lenny was saying about the interoperability non-negotiable, which I'm totally stealing that. I think that's a great idea when talking forward, because I think it's 2016. That should be a non-negotiable at this point. And so yeah, it has a lot of those abilities to kind of connect other nodes as well. So
fortunately, I think we have run out of time. I would like to say thank you very much to our esteemed panel, and I would like to invite everyone in the audience to join us in CoSN's 2017 conference, Invent the Future, which will be held in Chicago, April 3rd to 6th. This is one of my favorite conferences, primarily because of the caliber of the attendees and the content, and we welcome you all to join us. And I believe that is all we have for today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
thanks, everyone.